what we're here for and what we do, and we're really excited to have so many great folks in the House. And I really want to say thank you so much to the mayor for your incredible partnership, your support, your commitment to the LGBT community, and to so many in our community who need resources, including our young people, our seniors, folks living with HIV and AIDS, and really carrying a progressive agenda about housing and justice and jobs and equity for this community and this city. So thank you very much. We are just beyond honored to have you here today. And I will turn the proceedings over to you and just say thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And thank you for letting us use this incredible space and all the work that you continue to do to make this one of the best LGBT centers in the city. As someone who previously was the director of a nonprofit arts organization, and I know folks from the African American Art and Culture Complex are coming here tonight, I know how challenging it can be to raise funds and to keep a facility like this going. So make sure you support this facility and this organization. Thank you all so much for being here. And I won't be long because this really is about a conversation. And yes, it's probably a bitch session too, about some of the challenges that we face in San Francisco. We know that we continue to deal with what we know is a very challenging time in our city with homelessness, but we are making progress. We know that it's challenging with our housing and a number of other issues, but I'm really proud of a lot of the work that we're doing in City Hall every single day to make real progress. Now, I know that homelessness is still a real problem, but I will tell you that since I've taken office last July, we've been able to help almost 1,000 people get off the streets. And that, to me, is significant. But what we also know is that as we help all of those people, that we have not only 1,000, but 1,500 more to take their place. And so that means we have to do a better job with supportive services. We have to do a better job with building more housing. We have to make sure, and some of the things that we've already started working on, hiring a housing delivery director to cut back on the bureaucratic red tape to get housing production moving in San Francisco, identifying underutilized sites, the new windfall funding that we recently got. We were able to invest that in some new housing projects, including a 250-unit building that will house formerly homeless individuals, and I'm so excited about the kinds of investments that we're going to make in order to move housing production in the city forward. Some of the things that I'm proposing on the ballot, which I'm hoping members of the board will support me in, is a bond for 100% affordable housing, making sure that we bring to voters an opportunity to provide additional resources for affordable housing and building affordable and teacher housing as of right because of the bureaucratic layers that get in the way of housing production. It's not an easy conversation to sometimes have in other parts of the city where I know people feel really strongly about their views, they feel really strongly about their communities. But what I try and explain to people when we talk about housing production is the fact that, you know, I grew up here. So many people that I grew up with can't afford to live here. And if we don't start building housing now and be more aggressive in our approach to developing housing, then the next generation of San Franciscans growing up here won't even have a chance. So that's why this is so critical. Along with public safety and along with transportation and infrastructure and the challenges that continue to exist with our need to improve our infrastructure to move people around safely, so many challenges we know. And I gotta say that I am optimistic about the future of San Francisco because even though we know we face these challenges and we know that a lot of folks through a recent poll done by the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce have expressed that homelessness is their #1 issue and they want us to address this issue. 64% of those same people said, but they rather live in San Francisco than any place else in the world. And what that says is there is hope. there's hope for the future if we make the right investments, if we work together. And yes, we're going to have our ups and downs. We're going to have our fights. We're going to have our struggles. We know our small businesses are experiencing challenges, and we have to make sure that we invest more and we cut back on fees and bureaucracy for those small businesses. There are so many incredible things that I know we're going to be able to do to eventually get our city to a better place. And I am counting on so many folks in this room. We have a large number of department heads who are here to listen. We have the supervisor from District 8, Supervisor Raphael Mandelman, and Supervisor Valley Brown from District 5. And I got to say, as someone who came from the community and started working in City Hall, I was always frustrated with the disconnect between what was happening in City Hall and what was actually happening in the community. And we would pass laws, we would make decisions, and then I would try and go to one of my favorite restaurants, the Sheba Lounge or Eddie's Cafe, and I'd get an earful from my constituents about how this is negatively impacting their lives. I don't want us to continue to be a city that just decides on policy in a bubble with just a few people. I want us to bring our conversation to the community so that we hear from you directly, whether it's emails, whether it's town halls, or what have you. We're going to be hosting office hours all over the city. We need to make policy or remove policies based on your feedback, based on your challenges. I want San Francisco to be a better place for all of us. I want us to get there. And part of getting there is making the hard decisions, whether it's policy, whether it's investment, what have you. We know a lot to do, but I'm excited about the future and looking forward to hearing from you here tonight on things that you want to see us do so that we can make it better. And I also, wow, the whole departments, all the departments here. We got the chief of police, we got our new director of public health, got our housing folks, the DPW, and yes, MTA is here, but I know we have some challenges, Mr. Riskin, but we're gonna be nice tonight. So tonight is about, expressing ourselves, and yes, we know there are complaints, and we know that there are challenges. We're here to listen. That's really the point of this town hall, and with that, so that I'm not going on, am I turning it over to you, Claire? Or Supervisor? Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Mandelman for a few remarks, and then Supervisor Valley Brown, and then we're going to start opening up the conversation. Thank you.
I'm going to be super brief because you are here to hear from these amazing constituents, but I do want to thank you, Mayor Breed, for coming out into the community, being here, and allowing people the opportunity to talk directly with you and this amazing gathering of the top leadership from City Hall about the challenges facing San Francisco. We have great conversations inside the building, but I think it is useful to come out and give people the opportunity to actually express what's on their mind. So thank you very, very much for doing that. And I also do want to, if Rebecca Rolfe is still in the room, are you still, there you are. I just want to thank you, Rebecca, for hosting us today, and also for your extraordinary work all these many years in this center. I remember not so long ago that we were not sure that this building was even going to be able to keep its doors open. And now the doors are open, the building is completely remodeled, the finances make sense, and one of the, many folks are coming to me asking for help, but happily the center is not one of them anymore. So the center is definitely a success story, and that is largely through your leadership. So thank you, Rebecca Rolfe. And with that, I'll get out of the way and allow Supervisor Brown to say a few words.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mayor Breed, for bringing us all together. Thank you to the center and Rebecca. I think even though this is in District 8, I touch you just a little bit right across the street. So, really appreciate that you're here and you open this up. Can all the District 5 residents raise their hands? Yay, thank you for coming out. It's really important to hear you. We have our priorities. Mine is housing, and it's housing, and it's housing. It's all kinds of housing. Whether that is new housing, and yes, Mayor Breed, I will be part of that bond, anything for affordable housing. Absolutely. And then also, I've been really pushing, and we pushed through the ERAF and putting $40 million to buy existing buildings because it's so much, yes, I mean, buying existing buildings that people are living in to create affordable housing building. That's really a priority for me because it's so much easier to keep a person housed than to house them. And so that is going to be a priority, and how we're pushing funding and making sure people have we have the ability to buy those buildings before speculators buy them and Ellis Act a building. Very important. Also, having a navigation center in my district is very important. A Tay Navigation Center in the Haight-Ashbury. That is a priority on my list. I am looking high and low for that location. Anyone have suggestions? Please come to me. Please come to Jeff. He's right here. Just wanting to say thank you, everyone. We're here to listen. And thank you, Supervisor, for being one of my partners here. And so we're going to open it up. Thanks to the departments, too, for being here.
There we go. That's working now. Can you hear me in the back? Hi, everyone. My name's Claire Farley. I'm the director of the Office of Trans Initiatives, and I support our LGBT programs here in the city. And it's such an honor to welcome you here with Mayor Breed and the supervisors to really open it up to you all to hear about what questions you have for the city and for our mayor. So we have a couple mic runners in the room. We also have one in the back, and then we have some overflow room space as well where we're collecting questions. So if you do have a question but you're not able to share it with us today, please write that down on the note cards that are available. And the team is going to make sure that we respond to all of your questions. Because again, as the mayor said, this is really an opportunity for us to hear from you and make sure that we're being guided by the work that's out in the community. So I think we have a question, Alex, there in the back. And please introduce yourself and your affiliation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jojo Tai, and I serve on the San Francisco Youth Commission as a District 8 appointee and chair of the Housing Committee. Of the 1,300 youth who are experiencing homelessness in the city, about half of them are LGBTQ. My friends and community face a lot of violence in the streets, shelters, and other community spaces. There was a 2015 goal of 400 units of permanent supportive housing and a Tay Navigation Center. Today, in 2019, we have less than 200 units for youth and no established navigation center. Where does the city go from here, and when can we find the proportional funding to bridge this gap and meet the needs of trans and queer youth in the city?
So thank you for your question. In fact, the city has budgeted the funding to support a Tay Navigation Center. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the terminology, transitional age youth, it represents those young people between the ages of 18 and 24. Specifically, we have some locations that we have identified. And until we're able to lock those locations down with the property owners, we can't necessarily make that information available to the public, but it's funded. We have to find the location, and we have some options that we're looking into. I am like closing in on it, hopefully, but it's still a challenge, as you know, to try and find locations that we can use for this particular purpose, whether it's for transitional age youth or for adults. Just recently, we announced plans for a new shelter that will have over about 200 beds along the waterfront area, and that is going to be a challenge to get that particular space open, even if it's a temporary space to use. As far as housing and providing supportive housing for transitional age youth, one of the projects that I really fought for was the Booker T. Washington Community Center, and I'm so really proud of that work. But unfortunately, we need more. And our Rising Up campaign, which I'm sure you're familiar with, is really our goal to make sure that we are raising private dollars, public dollars, to provide support for those transitional AIDS youth for apartments that may not be affordable housing, may be in just the regular market. And so providing subsidies, providing wraparound services for housing and support is something that we are working on. Nothing is more important to me than ensuring the success of young people, because I've witnessed, you know, just some challenges that have existed, whether it was growing up in poverty or working at the African American Art and Culture Complex, and just a real disconnect between opportunity and young people in San Francisco. So we are committed to making the right investments, and I do know that we are not moving fast enough, but we are identifying the resources, raising the funds, and trying to get it going as quickly as possible. It won't be easy, but our goal is to end youth homelessness in this city. What is our year again? 2022. We can do better than that. Hopefully sooner than that, but we are really focused on that particular goal. So thank you for your question.
Thank you so much for your question. Do we have another question there in the back? Great, we have a question here. Mike Renner, or do you want to just stand and share your question?
Sure, I can stand. Hi, Mayor Breed. So I voted for you in part based on your Complete Streets initiative. It was a great Medium post. The tragedy of Tess Rothstein's death is that it was 100% preventable. Had she gotten 30 more yards into that protected bike lane, she would not have died. Our streets are grievously dangerous for daily cyclists like me. We've got 900 miles of street parking in the city and county. We have a handful of protected bike lanes. Can you commit to building not just a protected bike lane down the entirety of Howard to the Embarcadero, but a comprehensive, citywide, protected bike lane network this year?
So let me tell you that when I first became supervisor, for example, the Fell and Oak Street bike lanes were basically being delayed. And I really pushed hard to get those done ahead of schedule. And since I've been in office, one of the commitments that I have made is to move these projects forward faster. In fact, you probably are familiar with the work that we did to get Valencia going sooner rather than later, redirecting the resources, focusing on the high injury corridors, making the right investments to get San Francisco to a better place where, and I want to be clear because I think that there is some confusion around why we push for protected bike lanes. It's not because, the Bicycle Coalition and its advocacy is for safety. It's to keep people safe. We are trying to change how our infrastructure works, because there was a time where people never biked in San Francisco, hardly ever, and it was built to support cars. The Western Addition was destroyed to create what, in essence, on Gary Boulevard is a freeway. And so now we have to change behavior. We're almost like going backwards, and it's like pulling teeth. And so part of what we have to do is make the right investments and be more aggressive about improving these particular intersections where we know there are real challenges. One death is a tragedy, especially one that can be avoided. And so part of our responsibility is to, of course, do better. But I will tell you, one of my biggest frustrations oftentimes, and I'm not necessarily attributing that to anything other than, bureaucracy. And especially when I'm trying to put forth policies that are going to get rid of things and remove bureaucracy and remove layers that get in the way of how we allocate resources to get these things done, that is something we have to work on. I know the competitive bid process provides for equal opportunity for people to compete, but what happens when a case like this occurs and we need to get a contractor to deal with this situation now? Like, we can't have it both ways. We have to focus on making safety, making public safety the priority, and making the decisions and being more aggressive and moving these decisions forward to change just really what is a challenge with getting around in this city, whether you're on a bike, if you notice, 20 years ago, you didn't see so many people on bicycles using them to commute. You didn't see so many people walking around the streets. We have increased our population. We increased the number of people who are working in San Francisco, which means that we have to increase the abilities for people to use various modes of transportation to get around safely. It's about folks who are walking, feeling safe and knowing where they belong, folks who are on bicycles knowing where they belong, cars knowing where they belong, and yes, enforcement is a big part of this because we are not doing enough around enforcement. With people who I see on a regular basis driving in ways that are very dangerous. You know, we see the challenges with bicyclists as well. And so part of it is really trying to make sure we're holding everyone accountable, you know, to respect the rules of the law, but ultimately cars are the most dangerous. And we have to remember that when we are maneuvering our cars all over the streets, we have to be careful about even something as simple as opening our door or, you know, one of the things, there was a law that I heard about where, and I know I don't want to add another law, but the fact is, you know, if you just open your door, for example, in your car with your right hand, it forces you almost to look in the mirror to make sure that you don't open it. And it could be a car, it could be a scooter, it could be a bicyclist, it could be anyone walking past you. We all have to also take some responsibility along with changes to infrastructure to improve, you know, public safety for all citizens because, you know, this situation that happened is heartbreaking. And you're right, it could have been avoided. And that means that the longer we delay, that means the possibility that one more person could be the next victim, and we want to avoid that by any means necessary. So we definitely have work to do.
Thank you. So we have a question, Alex.
And after this question, we also have some questions from the overflow room. We're going to run up to you right now.
Great.
Yes, how you doing? Are you good? Yeah, I want to thank you, Mayor Bree, for even having a town hall. And actually, my name is James Pingola. I am director of Elliott Hutch Community Center. And I actually wanted to say that I have definitely seen the progress. Let me put down, I am a San Francisco native, actually a Fillmore District native, born and raised in the Western Addition. And I just actually want to say that I have seen the improvement in the homeless and cleaning up around the facility that I actually work at, the community center where we actually have a bunch of kids there. We actually run 150 kids through there on a daily, right? But what I'm starting to see now is that, you know, even though we're running the drug users away, what I'm starting to see now is the mental health piece of it coming through, right? And I just want to know what's your plan for, you know, kind of control the mental health. I want to thank DPW, SFPD, Supervisor Brown, Park and Rec for actually coming around making sure that we actually getting the needles and all that stuff actually cleaned up. But, you know, then now we're starting to see the things that we can't control, and that's the mental health part. So it's hard for us to kind of just go out and ask somebody that's not too, you know, not really there to say, hey, can you move? And you end up into one of these things. So I just want to know what's your plan for just kind of the mental health part of it all.
Yeah, and we've been working on some solutions, and I got to tell you, it's one of the biggest challenges that we face as the city. Ultimately, we got to look at this the same way that we look at someone who might get physically harmed. When you break an arm or when you have a sickness or what have you, you go to the hospital, the doctor diagnoses the condition, and sometimes there's support and help for it. And in the case of someone suffering from mental illness in various capacities, whether it's schizophrenia, whether it's someone who has psychosis brought on because of their drug use, or someone who has dementia, or all of these different things, we have to spend more time developing the right system of care for that particular population, especially people who may not have support from family members. So we are going to be hiring a mental health director who will operate directly under the Department of Public Health in order to organize the services that we are providing and also enhance those services. In fact, I have made it my mission to provide more mental health stabilization beds, which no one wanted to do, no one wanted to talk about. Now, since I've been in office, we've added 50 new mental health stabilization beds, and we're going to add another 100 this year. And I gotta say, Supervisor Mandelman has been my partner on our conservatorship law changes. They can't come fast enough. What we're doing right now, sadly, is using our jails and using our hospitals, you know, to cycle people in and out of the system, and that is not a solution to our public health crisis. And so part of what we are doing is working with Senator Scott Wiener. We got one bill passed. It's not sufficient. We're going to work with him on some changes to that bill so that it can actually work. And what that would do is allow us to go through the court system and provide a guardian who can make decisions for someone who unfortunately can't make decisions for themselves. And that is something Senator Wiener is working on through the process. Both myself and Supervisor Mandelman have been champions. And I got to tell you, it is one of the most challenging things that we're dealing with right now, but we have to shift the focus around mental health in a way that we never have before. Not just the people that we see on our streets, that we visibly see who need help, but also in some instances, you know from the children that you work with and the experiences that they have where they're sometimes dealing with trauma. And how are we gonna make sure that we provide the kinds of resources both in our schools, in our nonprofit agencies? How do we make sure that we have public health support in a very responsible way to deal with people suffering from depression or suffering from dementia or identifying the signs when a kid is struggling in some capacity? So we are just going to transform the conversation, and that's why we need a director to begin to centralize what we do around mental health reform in San Francisco. And this is something that is clearly a top priority, but I want to be honest, unfortunately, that change is not going to happen right away because we don't have all the tools that we need in terms of our laws in order to address some of the most significant challenges. But it doesn't mean that we won't continue to work on this issue to make those changes, to provide the mental health stabilization beds, and to begin the reforms that are necessary and make the right investments to deal with the challenge.
Great. Thank you. We have a question here.
Hi, Mayor Breed. My name is Daniel Bergerac. I'm a small business owner on Castro Street, and my part-time unpaid gig is president of the Castro Merchants Association. And you'll have to excuse me, but I'm going to refer to my notes. The San Francisco economy is robust and booming, full steam ahead. However, locally owned businesses in the upper market, Castro area are struggling and frustrated by the daily social challenges we face. We're struggling with homeless, mentally ill, and drug addicted that roam and live in our merchant corridors. Shoplifting, vandalism, increased trash, and high rents pose significant challenges to shop owners and contribute to our retail vacancy problem. It's become a vicious cycle, pitting shop owners against the homeless and the mentally ill. People don't want to shop where they don't feel safe, and shop owners don't want to run a business that's constantly under siege from vandalism, shoplifting, defecation in doorways, and harassment of staff. These increased risks are forcing retail staff to reevaluate working evening shifts. Additionally, we're frustrated with the limited amount of workforce housing for our staffs. We're frustrated by a planning department that takes 16 months to entitle a new business. This is a new business with zero neighborhood opposition. In fact, all neighborhood groups voted in favor of it, and it still took 16 months to get through the planning department. The city mandates, requirements, fees, taxes, coupled with sky-high rents and online retail competition all contribute to the empty storefront lining the shopping corridors of this booming city. What happens when the economy softens and retailers face increased challenges? What more can the city do to support small businesses and address the social issues that are soiling our shopping districts?
And I really appreciate your question because most recently I had a conversation with Joaquin Torres, who's the Director of Office and Economic and Workforce Development. And one of the things that we most recently did was made it easier to permit other use that weren't permitted in small businesses, but that's not far enough. We have to cut the fees. we have to cut city fees, things that we charge small businesses that make it difficult for you to continue to stay in business. Now, I know we don't have any control necessarily over the state taxes that get charged, but we do have control over fees that we charge businesses. I met with a small business owner who basically told me about the fee for the register and then the fee for this machine, and I'm like, what the, you know, like layers of fees. And scanner fee, really. I mean, Joaquin, change it. For me, what I'm most worried about, and it's not just the Castro and the market, if you look around every city and every commercial corridor where you used to have so many neighborhood thriving businesses, you don't see that anymore. And you don't see that because it's so difficult to do business. And the businesses that you see, the owners are right there working, their family members are struggling to hold it together, and I know we can do better than that. And so part of my directive to Joaquin is to really look at where can we cut the fees? Just like what we are proposing to do with accessory dwelling units. We're saying, okay, we have a surplus in the Department of Building Inspection, we can't use that money for anything else, cut the fees entirely for accessory dwelling units, which will incentivize people to want to build more housing. We got to do the same thing with small businesses. So what I'm committed to is trying to make it easier and trying to find solutions where, you know, it's not just like, I don't want to, I mean, legacy businesses are great, providing additional resources to help, you know, subsidize the rent are great, but ultimately, how do we cut back on what you have to pay the city? And that's really what I'm focused on to try and make life easier from the financial standpoint. As far as the other quality of life issues, that will continue to be a struggle for us because, again, we need more places for people to go. I'm proposing 1,000 new shelter beds that we need to get up and running sooner rather than later so that we have places for people to go. When we're offering services, when we're offering support, we need some place to take them. We also need our reforms to our mental health system because, as you know, so many of those people that you see are struggling with mental illness. And even if we were able to get them into a shelter bed, that's not a solution for them because they're going to be right back on the streets in the same location doing some of the same things that they're doing, which is why we need changes to our conservatorship laws in order to try and move more people off the streets. But more importantly, San Francisco can't do this by ourselves. And when I'm out there in the streets talking to people, because I'm always calling Jeff, and I'm like, Jeff, who is this guy? Jeff Kaczynski, who runs the Mayor's Office of Housing and Homeless Services, he usually knows their name or their story or the situation or why we can't get them help or what have you. And then there's all these new people as well who are coming from various situations, who I've talked to and tried to get an understanding. So many different reasons why people are choosing to come to San Francisco. But I do hear more often is, I heard I can get help here. And, you know, that is really frustrating because, you know, we help 50 people a week to get housed or reconnected with their families through our Homeward Bound program. And then we have 65 more people to take their place. And so,
what's frustrating is housing for our staff that's earning between $40,000 and $60,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
There is no place for them to live.
Mm-hmm.
If they go further out onto Concord or you know, Contra Costa County, they're on a very expensive BART train.
yes.
Then they have to switch over to Muni to get up to the Castro. At least 5 times a week I get, I'm sorry Ed, I get texts from my employees that just say MM.
Yeah.
That means they're going to be 15 to 45 minutes late. MM stands for Muni Meltdown. So, you know, if they live in the neighborhood, they can walk.
Yeah.
But there is no housing for them. There is no place for the people that aren't earning $200,000 a year or zero.
Yeah.
It seems like that's where our priorities are. There's nothing for people in the middle.
And I will tell you that we got to build it. And we've made some changes to our affordable housing requirements. And it was very challenging. I mean, I got a lot of pushback because, you know, it was implied that we were not doing enough for really low income people. But in fact, you know, I think we have to change how we provide housing, where we provide housing for low, moderate, and middle income. And so when I'm going to be working with the Board of Supervisors to put together a ballot measure, and that ballot measure, I'm of course pushing for to pay for different layers of affordability. And what I would also encourage, because we do have, options, even though those options are very challenging to get, is to go to the Mayor's Office of Housing website, make sure that they register. There's alerts that come out like almost every day, once or twice a day, of housing options that vary in terms of who qualifies. And I would encourage, your employees to apply for everything that they qualify for. But we also got to get rid of the layers that get in the way. It is so difficult to build housing in this city. And as soon as we, again, come to a particular neighborhood, and I mean, even in the Haight-Ashbury, where we were able to buy the McDonald's site, where I'm like, well, let's, do what's in reason. Let's not, of course, mess with the character, but we can go possibly 6 or 8 stories, and we could provide new affordable housing. But of course, there's pushback to say, we shouldn't go this far, but we're going to have to go that far. We're going to have to do more. So I'm sorry I can't offer you immediate housing hope, but my aggressive housing agenda, hopefully there will be some impacts that you will feel, but we also have to do outreach where people have to apply for this housing too, and not give up if they don't get access to a particular development, because there's real possibilities out there, but it's going to take time and effort, and so those are just a few of the things that we're working on, and I wish it was better, but I think eventually over time, again, with the right investments, it will get there.
So before we jump into some other questions in the room, and we do have our mic runners, so please feel free to grab them. We've got some questions that came in from the room next door. So there's been a lot of discussion, Mayor, for years about finding a permanent home for the LGBTQ History Museum. And the question is, will you help with this community effort?
And I'm happy to. That's what we're here for. Who's in charge of the effort? Supervisor.
Well, Terry Bestwick is head of the LGBT History Museum, and we're looking forward to working with you
Okay.
on finding a permanent home.
Yeah, well, work with us. Happy to provide our office as a resource for sure.
We'll trade business cards afterwards.
Okay. And Joaquin is right here to do the work. That's what they're here for, to do the work.
Yeah, and I'll just add to the question around affordable housing. The Dahlia program that the mayor is speaking of is the online portal, which you can have access to, and also here at the LGBT Center, as well as Open House, which is LGBT senior support services for housing, have housing workshops and one-on-one counselors to be able to help connect you to those platforms and those services. So obviously Kate and her team are doing amazing work, but there's direct services in the community as well, so you don't have to go to an online portal.
I just want to make sure District 5 residents know that at the Fillmore Heritage Center, which is on Fillmore, San Francisco Housing Development Corporation is in there. It's a community hub. They also have housing workshops, credit workshops, all these different workshops to get people ready to apply and for affordable housing. So in both of our districts, we have these resources for you. Thank you.
Great, so we're gonna go back to Alex for the next question.
Hi, Mayor, Soups and Reps. Thanks for being here. So my first question is real quick. The LGBTQ Cultural Heritage Strategy, a plan to preserve and promote LGBTQ culture in San Francisco, is moving through the planning department. It was started by Supervisor Scott Wiener, and this is my first of 2 questions. Who in City Hall will be our champion to move this past the finish line?
Who will be our Joaquin?
I was hoping it would be Raph and our mayor, but that means I'm coming to you.
I'm going to make Joaquin do everything. Don't
I
worry,
know.
you guys have stuff to do too.
It'll be a combination in partnership with our office, Mayor's Office of Housing, the Planning Department to move that effort forward.
But we need a one point person, so, okay, thank you.
Thanks. My question is more so that the cultural districts are a great way to embed culture into our neighborhoods, and they have the potential to actually gentrify the neighborhoods. How will you ensure that the cultural districts don't stimulate gentrification and instead demand more than cash incentives for modest, affordable housing from developers?
So I think part of some of the projects that we've been able to do in San Francisco has been, community benefits that help stabilize some existing long-term nonprofit agencies that serve the community. I know that in one particular case, there was community benefits that help to purchase and keep a building through our small sites acquisition program, to help purchase and keep that building affordable because it was on the market and those folks possibly were facing, unfortunately, who knows what as a result of a new owner of that particular building, and now it's a completely 100% affordable building. And so I think there are creative ways when looking at developers and their responsibilities to the communities that they are developing in to provide not only housing, affordable housing on their sites, which is always something I really love to do, and not to mention I help get neighborhood preference legislation passed so that 40% of all those units go to the people who actually live in that district first, which I think is one way to make sure that folks in the neighborhood have access to those units, but also having a number of investments, whether it's low rents for a particular commercial space or free space for nonprofit agencies that already are there that serve that purpose. So there are just various ways in which we can do that. But I will tell you again, it takes a long time to get to those final agreements because sometimes people have differences of opinion as to where the investments should go. So we end up fighting, and then we hash it out, and then we come to an agreement, and that takes a little time. But there are just various ways to do that for sure. But as someone who lived through what happened in the Western Addition, I'm very sensitive to how we change neighborhoods, but also provide opportunities for existing community. And that's why I fought so hard for neighborhood preference, because I think that's one tool in which we can ensure that folks from the community have a real chance of accessing what becomes newly available in a neighborhood.
And actually, I was your aide when we fought for neighborhood preference, but I just had a hearing. We just had a hearing at GAO, Government Audit and Oversight, about neighborhood preference, and it's actually working. And so many people in all areas of the city, all of the districts of the city, have been getting housing near where they live. And I think that's really important. So to do, when you do legislation, you never know if it's going to work. But 4 years later, the proof is in the pudding. It's actually working. So thank you.
And I would just add, the success of Open House in providing LGBT senior or LGBT affirming and friendly senior housing has been highly reliant on the neighborhood preference. So that's another area where it's been helpful. I do want to also, you mentioned places where folks in District 5 can get help with accessing some of the housing programs, and the LGBT Center also does that. So for folks who are looking to tap in and think about how they might be able to qualify for a home buyer program, or to get into rental housing, the center is a great resource for that as well.
And I just also want to add, you don't just have to have questions, you can also have comments or suggestions or things that you think we should be doing, like based on your personal experiences.
Great. This question here. Sir? Here real quick. Here. Oh, we'll go here and then here. Sorry.
Yes. I'm Peter Warfield from Library Users Association. And it isn't just a matter of libraries, oh, there he goes again, but there are a lot of things that are going on at the libraries that are not good for the public, either through their expressed or even not expressed interest. And I'd like to just point out 3, some of which have a real decision point coming up. One is radio frequency identification technology, which is coming to the library. It was funded in July. It's very privacy threatening. The American Civil Liberties Union of Northern California and the Electronic Frontier Foundation have both strongly opposed the installation of this at the library. Number 2, the library every 5 years under the Proposition D that has made it very wealthy considers hours. And for the second time in a row, the library once again is cutting the very hours that people tell the library through surveys they want the most. and that's evenings and weekends, particularly evenings. The library this time around has just cut 15 evening hours from 10 different libraries. For example, Sunset, which had 3 nights a week closing at 9, is closing at 8, 3 nights a week, and that also affects programming. The third item is fines and fees, which I know you've recently expressed something about. The library, as we know, fines and fees that are fixed in price are like a regressive tax. They hurt the poorest people the most. And so what the library has done recently is to put out a report giving all the reasons why fines are bad and wrong and counterproductive, but only focusing on fines and not what we've been talking about for years and other places too, fines and fees. The legislation that they're proposing only proposes to get rid of fines into the future and not touch or even consider the fines that are on the books, which currently people owe $600,000 in fines.
Great,
and
thank
not
you.
to consider
Thank you.
fees at all, for example, replacement books, and that's 4 times as much. So we'd like to know, we'd like the legislation to include all the fines as well as fees, and you have a chance also when it shortly is coming up for you to choose a new city librarian to keep all of these bad things in mind, and what will the new librarian that you will select, how will you decide on a new one? You're supposed to get 3 names from the Library
Great,
Commission.
thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
So first of all, thank you very much. I appreciate having a woman as a mayor and your approach of community, because I think that speaks to what women do very well, is consensus and trying to bring everyone together. I'm going to be anonymous, and I'm going to talk about a topic you don't hear much about, and I'm here to raise the issue. Family court is broken. Single mothers are going broke and homeless, fighting the injustices that are happening in SF family court. Currently is a battle of who has the most money, is who wins the kids, who wins the property, and this is just fundamentally wrong. Today, I was helping a mother, and I received a quote for $600 for a mother to see her child for 3 hours. This mother hasn't seen her children in 6 weeks. That's $200 an hour. How much do you have to make to be able to afford that? I would like to ask the city of San Francisco to create a channel where the injustices of San Francisco family court can be addressed, and an unbiased family court can be created. There needs to be a method to communicate and request that factual information is used instead of bias. So my questions are specifically, what area of city government is going to work on changing that? And I appreciate the gentleman over there to ask for who is going to be our champion in San Francisco, in the government, so to help represent the underrepresented, so that we can have factual information as opposed to judges and custody evaluators that present biased information.
Thank you for your question, and I'm not as familiar with the details of what you're referring to, but I will make sure that we get back to you with the right person to address this particular issue. Do you know what department that falls under? The Department of?
Probably Children, Youth and Services, or Family Welfare.
Okay, so we have a number of different city departments, and I'm sorry, I'm not as familiar. We have Child Protective Services, which I believe the social workers who exist in that department may be responsible for this particular issue, but may not be doing it in a way that, I mean, to be charged to see your kid is just something that's really sad and unfortunate, and I would hope that we can make some changes to what is clearly an inequitable system that is not affordable to people who may not have money to facilitate a process like this. So I apologize, but we will definitely, and I know you want to remain anonymous, and we're happy to figure out a way in which we could coordinate information to get back to you on a real solution to try and address that particular problem. And thank you for bringing it to our attention.
And please feel free to either talk with myself or Kira, who gave you the mic, and we'll connect offline. So we have one question here in the back with Alex.
Hi, my name's Jennifer, and I've got kids in the public school system. And I'm curious what the city is doing to support our public school teachers here in San Francisco. I know you mentioned sometimes there's disagreements about how funds should be spent. I know that that's been a recent disagreement, so I'm just curious what your plans are to keep our kids in good schools.
Well, I went to public schools in San Francisco, and I really am committed to working with our superintendent to address what I know are serious inequities in terms of providing services to some of our underperforming schools, which continues to be a bit of tension that exists between, you know, what I believe is my office and the school district, and the challenges with making sure that all of our kids are provided with support and resources, especially in what we know are sadly some of the largest number of underperforming schools, which sadly are in the Bayview Hunters Point southeast sector of the city. So my commitment is to continue to work with the school district to try and find creative solutions, including bonuses or incentives or support, you know, to try and get the kind of resources and stability with the teachers in those particular areas, because retention continues to be a problem. But there are other issues that come into play that, you know, the teachers union, there's a bit of a challenge in terms of how you know, they feel about, you know, equity in terms of what their teachers get paid, but there's just, you know, there's seniority, there's other issues, but our lowest performing schools need a lot more attention and a lot more resources. Separately from that, the city provides over $100 million in funding to the school district because of the generous support of the voters of the city. There's Department of Children, Youth, and Families, where there's additional resources for other programs. And I mean, the list goes on and on. I think the problem is the efforts aren't as coordinated as they should be to really make sure that the resources that are provided are being used in a more efficient way to really make the kind of difference that we need. But my commitment is to the kids and to seeing that achievement gap closed. And I think that everyone should be at the table and willing to sacrifice in order to do that. And that's what I'm going to be pushing for.
And I'm just curious, is San Francisco looking at any of the teacher housing programs that some other cities have taken on?
We are, and in fact, there's an area where we don't have funding that we need the support, and hopefully we can get gap funding with potentially this housing bond that we're looking at for where Playland is in the Sunset. Is it the Sunset or the Richmond? Sunset? Okay, it's in the west side of the city where there's 100% affordable teacher housing, and I know that the school district is making decisions around their properties as well for the purposes of providing housing for their teachers. And I know that today, because I met with the superintendent to talk about ways in which we can, you know, support our educators and get them to apply for our existing affordable housing and our down payment assistance program. You know, there is support that is provided, but it's just not enough because it's so expensive to live in San Francisco. So it continues to be a challenge, but it's something that we're trying to have a real partnership. What I want to make sure that, you know, there's a real partnership in our efforts and not the city being told what to do. It's like we need to work together if we want to address these issues, and that's really what I'm focused on. And again, the achievement gap, which has existed, you know, since before I was born and has not been addressed and not been the target of focus like it should, and it's something that we need to make sure we invest in.
Oh, I just want to say a few words about that, because even though in the ERAF money we gave the teachers raises, it's not enough to live here because housing is too expensive. And so I think teacher housing is what is going to keep teachers here. If a teacher has to drive outside this city back and forth, eventually they will leave. And I think that Mayor Breed hit on the point, and we've been talking about this at the board and pushing the school district to look at their land for teacher housing. And we've done a lot of private-public development in this city, like the port, and where we can build private-public land for the teachers. But it means that the district will have to step up and look at the land that they have to be able to use this for teacher housing. I don't see it happening any other way of keeping teachers here with the raise they got, with the kind of costs the housing is right now. So this is something we really need to have the school district step up, and I think all of us are in support of that.
And I would just, if I could add, one of the things that was sad and frustrating to me about the ERAF conversation was I think it left a lot of particularly public school parents feeling like schools aren't valued in San Francisco and that the city government doesn't value schools enough. And I just want to say that that I think is really not true, and that I think actually in terms of what San Francisco, the commitment that our vote, as Mayor Breed said, that our voters have made, that we use $100 million of general fund money each year to go over and support all the things that have been lost since Prop 13 passed in the public schools. And that is a commitment that no other county in California makes. And so that's significant. And then what we did around ERAF, where we actually went further and said we're going to use these general fund dollars actually to support raises for teacher salaries. And again, it's not enough, but that is an unprecedented commitment, which I'm proud of, and I know the mayor is proud of. We need to do more, but really it's very, very hard in this state where funding for schools is so bad statewide, and where we've gone from, you know, when I was born, being one of the states that spent the most on per pupil spending to being one of the states that spends the least. And so that's, you know, a statewide conversation around Prop 13. But I think San Franciscans, we always have to push for more, but we really ought to be proud about what our city does for our public schools.
Wonderful. So we only have time for a couple more questions, but I want to let folks know, I know we could be here all night, Mayor, but we will have department heads sticking around for a little bit afterwards. So we'll
Should we introduce the department heads quickly here?
Yeah, we can do that. Why don't we take the last two questions and then we'll introduce. So Kira, we have one question in the back.
Hi, Lyndon, Mayor Breed. My name is David. I'm part of, I'm a student of the UCSF UC Hastings Health Policy and Law Masters, and also part of the SFDPH as a healthcare worker. Over years of medical coursework, public health work, and health policy experience, it became indubitably evident to me that housing, security, and health status are intimately tied. I live in the Mission, about a block from the 1979 Mission Street project that they're proposing. So my question is, what is your take on this project? And if this project was greenlighted, how will you ensure that this project would not simply drive out existing homeless individuals from the 16th Street Mission BART area? It would not, how would you make it so that it would not gentrify this neighborhood? And how would you preserve the rich and unique history of the Mission District?
Are we talking about the project on Mission in 16?
Yeah, the one next where the Walgreens is.
Yeah. And so here's the sad reality. I mean, that particular project, along with a number of other projects that have been built in the Mission, has already moved the Mission neighborhood in a direction that has really changed it. I hardly, as someone who was born and raised here, I hardly recognize the neighborhood anymore. And I think part of it is we have to do better with our investments in, number one, affordable housing, number two, small site acquisition. So that is, again, protecting people who are in buildings where most of the individuals are potentially low-income individuals who need long-term protections, and also holding developers accountable to do more in a neighborhood that's been rapidly gentrified. So it's something that continues to be a challenge. The folks in the Mission community supported my efforts around neighborhood preference because even though they had been advocating for affordable housing, and in some instances we were able to get some of those projects built a long time ago, they weren't still getting access to them. So neighborhood preference plays a critical role, but we haven't been building enough affordable housing in this particular community. And part of the recent support through the Board of Supervisors for the windfall, the ERAF funding that we keep talking about, some of those funds are going to be used, hopefully, to purchase properties that are available in the Mission District in particular for the purposes of 100% affordable housing. So there are a number of things, and since I've been in office, we've broken ground on 2 new 100% affordable housing projects that are coming up and going to be built, and 40% of those units will go to the folks in that neighborhood. And so I think really it's going to be about investments. It's going to be about and I'm not saying the housing bond is going to solve everything, but a number of folks from the mission in particular who have been fighting for housing are going to be at the table and helping to make decisions around how dollars get allocated, but we have to invest more ultimately, and we have to do more outreach and more support, and also, of course, really hold developers accountable in this particular neighborhood more so than ever because of how rapidly things have changed, and I'm definitely committed to that.
Great, so our next question comes from Alex in the back. And just to highlight to folks, Alex and his team are also working to do neighborhood sessions with the mayor. So that information will be available on the mayor's site. Also, we'll be doing monthly town halls. The next one is on May 6th at UCSF in Mission Bay. Alex, your question?
Thank you, Mayor Breed, for taking my last question here. My name is Shelley. I'm with the Surfrider Foundation, and I lead a program within Surfrider called Hold On to Your Butt. And we're all about getting rid of cigarette litter in the city. I wanted to thank you, first of all, because I know you've supported efforts to actually have policy legislation to ban cigarette filters in the past. And we would love to talk to you more about that now that you are mayor. In addition, sadly, even though the cigarette litter fee has been in place since 2009, a study 5 years after showed that the overall percentage of cigarette litter actually increased. So I'd also love to talk with you about much more effective ways that we can make use of the millions of dollars that come in from that fee specifically to abate cigarette litter every year, specifically through education and infrastructure and something that can actually extend citywide to really stop this toxic plastic litter from entering our waterways. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we have one question from the overflow room. This will be our last question. So there's been a lot of discussion for years about finding rereading the other question. Safe injection sites are on as an effective way to reduce HIV and AIDS infection rates. Where is the city at on the implementation of safe injection sites?
I got to tell you.
Sorry.
This, you know, I'm really determined to make this happen because, you know, I think what I want people to understand why, you know, I'm advocating for this is because, you know, people who unfortunately struggle with substance use disorder, they're not just going to go away because we don't want to see it. And we have to get creative around solutions to try and help people get into treatment. This is about, yes, getting the needles off the streets, yes, getting people who are shooting up off the streets, but more importantly, we have to meet people where they are, especially when they're asking for help. You know, sadly, I have a lot of experience dealing with people in my family and friends who suffer from substance use disorder, and it is heartbreaking. There are a number of things that you know, prevent people from, you know, seeking help, and one of them is just access. And part of what a safe injection site provides is access to the possibility when someone is treated with respect and not judged, and most likely when they're ready to get help, they're going to go to those same people who are in that site who they see probably every single day. And it really, it's about, for me, making sure there are real places for treatment on demand. And so I'm committed to, I'm really committed to making this happen, and I know Dr. Colfax, who is our new director of the Department of Public Health, is also equally committed to this work. State Senator Scott Wiener reintroduced his bill that was vetoed by former Governor Jerry Brown in hopes that our new governor, Gavin Newsom, will support it. That's just one hurdle that I think will help us feel a lot more empowered to do a safe injection site, even though there are some serious federal challenges that we are definitely very concerned about. But I think that it's important that we move forward, and I'm committed to moving forward. I also have to, unfortunately, you know, if I thought, you know, it wouldn't be as challenging as the whole moving forward with marijuana thing, where people, potentially face the possibility of getting arrested. In this particular case, we're concerned about taking away people's federal money and getting arrested and a couple of other things, but it's definitely something I'm seriously going to push for. I'm not going to drop the ball, and I think that we need two important things to happen. Number one, we need to pressure Gavin. Don't tell him I told you that, but we need to, because I still need money for housing from him. But number two, we need to elect a new president, because the fact is, we are under threat on a regular basis with all of the progressive policies and values that we continue to try to push in order to, change our city, which in essence changes our country for the better. So I am hoping to continue to move in that direction and get it done.
Thank you, Mayor. So unfortunately, we are out of time.
You actually looked at me and you said that I was going to be able to ask the question, so I have a very important question about the LGBT community. Sure. Okay, Madam Mayor, how are you?
Good.
And people of this fine city, I want everyone to be aware that, hi. Okay. I want everyone to be aware that there's a problem. There's a disconnect between justice and the LGBT community, and how especially transgender people are seen in this community. And one of the most unfortunate things that I've experienced since I've been here for 4 years, moving from Texas, was to find that law enforcement, people who I'm supposed to be able to trust, SFPD and the sheriff, have been across the line, a line of responsibility and dignity that each human being should be encountered, and they don't have the training, they don't have the funds, they don't have the correct, their department is so divided between all the departments and how they see and how they react to, especially people that are LGBT and have a mental illness. They don't know how to respond properly, and there are so many people that end up being in jail that shouldn't be in jail, or so many women who don't have justice that can't get justice because someone covers it up or someone doesn't want to talk about it, even though it's very difficult to talk about hate crimes that happen in our own city, our own progressive city, where that's not supposed to happen, but it does. That's why I've been wearing this cape this whole entire time, because I'm a victim of a hate crime, and it didn't seem like everyone was paying attention, because I'm not the only woman who's been hurt by the system. I got attacked by a security guard, and then I didn't have police to back me up to try and get my attacker. And I'm not the only one. And so I want to know what you will do with the Board of Supervisors to ensure that the LGBT community and law enforcement and other citizens get reconnected and have a real conversation about how to have justice for everybody.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your question. And part of what's important is to build a relationship. And what we did when Supervisor Brown and I worked together for so many years in the Western Addition community, when we were dealing with a lot of crime and also a lot of distrust with the police department, we started to come together and have conversations and started to work together. And there was a consistent relationship that was built over time. And I think that part of what I want to see happen for the rest of the city, because we know that there are challenges that exist with law enforcement and so many folks in various communities, especially, our low-income communities, we have to start to build that bridge. And that takes developing a relationship. That takes making sure there's community engagement, where you're not just seeing officers when there's a problem, but the officers are there on a regular basis just to say hello. And that's what occurred. And I gotta tell you, the first couple of years, not days, years, the boys in the African American Art and Culture Complex, they throw stuff at the police, they curse the police out. I mean, it was really challenging. It was a really tense, relationship, because we would still ask them to come, and we wanted them there, and we wanted to have the hard conversations, and they had the hard conversations. They let the boys make the comments and say what they needed to say, we don't trust you, and why are you trying to, like, we gotta have those hard conversations. But after a while, first it was like they wouldn't speak to the officers. As time went by, little head nod. As time went by, little fist bump. And now so many of those kids are adults and have these incredible relationships with some officers who are not, they're kind of all over the city. They're not still all in the district. Some of them still are. But they're like, oh, that's, you know who the kid is. You're like, hey, how you doing? Like that kind of relationship, that kind of rapport. And so we have to do that with our entire police department throughout our city. We have to build better relationships. And our officers have to be out there, walking the beats, getting to know our communities, and not just when there are challenging times. And I gotta tell you, the people who get the text messages from me the most are definitely our police chief, of where are the officers, what's going on over here, who have they been talking to, what's happening. I want to see beat officers when I'm out in the community. I spend days just kind of randomly in disguise, walking around neighborhoods. I put on a little disguise. I'm not going to tell you guys what it is, but I just want to see while I'm going and I'm walking and hanging out. I want to see what I see. I want to see if there's a lot of dirt somewhere, or if there are officers walking, or what's going on with Muni, what's going on with people who are struggling with homelessness. And so part of it is these are the folks who are helping to lead the city, and so they have a responsibility to work to make life better for each and every one of you. And that is something, especially with law enforcement, that I'm definitely committed to, and we're going to keep working on that. And we're happy to even begin the conversation where we could have a conversation with our officers, with our chief, with Claire moderating in our trans community, to really have the discussion around how do we build a better bridge so that people feel safe in their communities, and feel that they are also going to be protected too. And I'm definitely committed to that. So thank you for your question.
Thank you. So now I'd like to turn it over to our department heads to introduce themselves. For HSH, which is the Housing and Homeless Services Police Department, they're going to be in the red room, which is 201, just out this door. And then MTA, Public Works, is going to be in the blue room, which
I think they need their own rooms. No, I'm just kidding.
Which is going to be around the corner. And then myself, Parks and Rec, OEWD, and the supervisors will be in this room. So with that, I'm going to turn it over.
And then we have, where's Kate Hartley from Office of Housing?
Oh, sorry, Kate, you'll be in here with us.
And then Dr. Colfax.
And Dr. Colfax, sorry. My list wasn't complete. So yeah, let's turn it over to.
So also, can I add before we turn it over? First of all, I just want to thank all of you for coming here tonight. I know that some of you may have other questions or concerns and may not have had an opportunity to get your questions asked, or you may not feel comfortable talking in front of an audience, and that's totally okay. So if you could reach out to my office, and I'll give you, what is my email address? And we're writing it up here, Mayor London. Hey, I didn't know that. It was london.breed@sfgov. You remember that? So it's Mayor London Breed. Cool. So that's my email address. And is there also a phone number?
Yes, my phone number is 415-554-5977.
And so that's the email and phone number, but also, if you ever have questions or concerns and you don't know who to call, you can try and call 311, but also we have an Office of Neighborhood Services. And sometimes you just want to talk to somebody directly. And so that office, Alex, is located in what room in City Hall?
First floor, room 160, the Van Ness side.
Yes, and then last but not least, along with town hall meetings, we're going to be hosting some community office hours. So I'm trying to get out of City Hall and bring it to the community for the purposes of just really engaging in conversations. But also, I want to also see you know, what you're experiencing, so that I can make sure that they all know what you're experiencing. And so the reaction, I'm hoping, will be a lot better, and we will hopefully get to a place where people are really excited and happy about the changes that we've been able to make. So thank you all so much for being here tonight.